Book on the Thom Hartmann Book Report today, or Book Club today, is Cuban Women Confront the Future. It's an interview with Vilma Espin. Vilma Espin was the president of the Federation of Cuban Women since its founding in 1960, and was the chair of the Commission for Social Prevention and president of the Infancy Institute and the International Federation of Democratic Women. And it's a long-form interview, actually, the book. So the first question: what does socialism mean in the lives of a Cuban family, and in particular, Cuban woman? Vilma Espin. For the Cuban family, especially the woman, socialism has meant an enormous improvement to the quality of life and personal development. We should remember that until January 1st, 1959, in our country, hunger, poverty, exploitation, repression, and dependence reigned. The revolution opened up new horizons in the economic, political, and social fields, and amongst its key principles is the defense of equal rights for all human beings. The constant struggle to make ends meet disappeared, and with it the antagonism between people competing for the crumbs that could help them escape the tragic destiny that awaited the majority. Thus the family, the basic cell of society, could develop in a rounded way. Our revolution assured all Cubans the chance to exercise each one of their inalienable rights. Each citizen is assured that food prices are reasonable and that education and medical services are free. The state makes a systemic effort to improve living standards to the extent that it is permitted by the tense battle for development that we wage under blockade and constant imperialist threats. Child care facilities have been created to provide care for the children of tens of thousands of working women from the age of 3 months to 6 years. Services to lighten domestic work have been created. Hundreds of thousands of students have also received free lunch at day school and all their meals at boarding school. Hundreds of thousands of workers also receive their meals at a moderate price in their workplace. More industrial laundries and dry cleaners have been established, and more domestic labor-saving devices are available with preference in acquisition and cheaper prices for workers. Huge resources are dedicated to housing construction in urban and rural zones. We also try to guarantee recreational facilities and spiritual enjoyment to all the population. Of course, the possibilities are exciting, but also what we have achieved to date, considering our limitations, is already vastly superior to what families experienced in the past. Social Security provides an income for those who cannot work. As far as women are concerned, equal rights have certainly changed their position in the family and in society. A woman's participation in social production, because it implies her financial independence, has altered her dependent position in the marriage and allowed a change in her ideas, in the way she looks at life. The laws that govern family relations, such as the Family Code, are based on equality and guarantee the right of members of the family to participate in society, to work, study, and to responsibly educate the children in line with our revolutionary principles. This does not mean that we achieved all that we aspire to. We still have problems of a material nature to resolve, which are directly related to our economic development. There is still the need to eliminate backward ideas that some people hold, men and women, with respect to the role that each person should play within the home, the nature of the socialist family and the relationship between a couple, ideas which work against the full participation of women in the building of a new society. Obviously, the economic security guaranteed by both men and women having access to work, free health care, and education, the obvious satisfaction and confidence in oneself that equal opportunity and the chance to fully develop to the extent of one's talents, intelligence, and aptitude offer to each person, the constant motivation and emotional stability that comes from feeling useful, recognized, and dignified as a human being. Everything that socialism has brought to us undoubtedly fulfills the deepest desires of a family, particularly the woman, who until just a quarter century ago was exploited, oppressed, and marginalized in the family and in society. Question: what is the primary concern in Cuba, work or the human being? What place do women occupy within this concern? Vilma Espin. In Cuba, a country that is building socialism, the highest aim is human happiness, based on respect for the fundamental human rights of each person. That includes full social equality to education, healthcare, work, and professional training, with the chance to employ all of one's faculties to take an active role in society and to help develop that society, to create the material and spiritual basis for a full, harmonious life, where the highest qualities of both men and women flourish. To reach those aspirations requires work, talent, dedication, and willingness from everybody. It requires constant scientific and technological innovation to assure economic and social development. Thus, each member of our society, along with the right to work and all the benefits brought by the revolution, has acquired the duty to help create the economic basis necessary for such advantages. The building of a new society and the fulfillment of new aspirations could not possibly be achieved except on the basis of work and the willingness of the whole population. And the people work with enthusiasm because work is the means for creating wealth and goods for all to enjoy. Work that is free from exploitation does require a new dimension, a quality that stimulates and produces satisfaction. To feel that you are useful and are creating your destiny, to project yourselves toward the future through your work, to cultivate the future. In a speech in January 1964, Che Guevara said that when each Cuban viewed work as a vital expression of their human creativity, technology, technique, and inventions would proceed apace, and all would participate with an uncontainable force in building the new society. The book, Cuban Women Confront the Future by Vilma Espin. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters Series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Bar.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Friday, TGIF, Shabbat Shalom, Juma Mubarak, whatever it may be for you. In China, it's the Lunar New Year. It's, well, actually, it will be tomorrow. And China's having a real problem right now with this Wuhan coronavirus outbreak. They've now extended. Yesterday, I told you that 20 million people were quarantined, essentially. Now it's 36 million. And the death toll has just about doubled. In the latest death that it's being widely publicized, I mentioned yesterday, it was mostly older men who were in bad health. This was a young man in his 30s who was in excellent health, and he just died of it. So, the world is starting to take notice, and there's even concern. There's a fascinating piece in the Financial Times today that, it's already affecting the Chinese stock market, and it might start affecting world stock markets. In fact, it may have already started yesterday or the day before. So, a lot going on. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. We're going to have one brief guest for about 5 minutes at the end of this hour. And other than that, it's you and me today. There's a lot going on today. And our telephone number, by the way, is 202-808-9925. And Senator Mitch McConnell this morning gave a speech in which he was basically, I was amazed. I was listening to it. Louise and I were running errands, and I was listening to it on the Sirius XM on the radio, and he actually called Mitch McConnell's. He said it was Mitch McConnell's scheme. That's like really cool. But here's just two things that he said about this, and I want to toss one of these as a question out to you. He said, this is the first time probably a majority of Republicans have heard the whole case start to finish. And what he's talking about is the fact that these Republican members of the House and Senate, they know that Fox News is basically their echo chamber, and so they don't watch CNN, they don't watch MSNBC. They watch Fox all the time, just like Trump does. So Schumer goes on to say many of them hear it on Fox News, and we know what Fox News does. They leave out the most damning parts against the president, and they even distort some of them, which is absolutely true. I mean, if you want, for example, you want Russian propaganda, forget about RT, go to Fox News. I mean, this is where it is. So anyhow, Schumer said, by the way, and people forget this, the Republicans could call Hunter Biden on their own. They have 53 votes. You know why they don't? Because they know it will just confirm to every American that everything the president is doing and has done in this whole sad saga, everything the president's lawyers are doing, everything the Republican senators are doing is just political. Wow. Talk about taking names and kicking ass. So, we'll see. And which raises the question that I said I'm tossing out to you is, should Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden for that matter, come to the Senate and testify? And I think they should. I absolutely think they should. If they don't, Trump has thrown so much of this crap at Joe and Hunter Biden that it's essentially all over the lens. Whenever there's a discussion of Joe Biden's candidacy and presidency, you can guarantee if Joe Biden becomes this party's nominee, which is, I think, looking increasingly less likely, but we'll see. But if he becomes this party's nominee, that's going to be the thing that the Republicans go after him with. Trump has turned Ukraine for Joe Biden into the equivalent of, Hillary Clinton's emails, which, of course, we know Jim Comey came out and announced the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, and she dropped 3 points in the polls, and that was 2 weeks before the election. So Trump is going to do the same thing. Why not get ahead of it? Why not just, in open court, as it were, before the United States Senate, simply say, well, here's what happened. Have Hunter Biden tell his story about why he went on the board of Burisma. Have Hunter Biden explain what he did on the board of Burisma and whether it was him who was compensated or whether it was his law firm and how much of that money passed through and whether he considered it appropriate that, probably the main reason he was on was because his dad was vice president. I think that just needs to be laid out there. And he may well come out and say, I really shouldn't have done that. But it has nothing to do with my dad. That's what we've been told he would say. And then Joe Biden can go before Congress and, if what he would say under oath is the same thing that he's been saying, privately and publicly. And that is that, his kids are adults. They're grown up. They're out in the world, making their way. And he has an agreement with them that, they're not going to tell each other what to do in their lives. So I think it would actually work to Joe Biden's benefit. Peggy Noonan wrote an op-ed that was published today, I believe, in the Washington Post, and in which and Peggy Noonan, a Republican op-ed writer, in which she's saying the same thing, and which is not conventional wisdom on the GOP side, by the way. They keep talking about wanting Hunter Biden to testify, but they actually don't want Hunter Biden to testify. If they did, they would have simply subpoenaed him. They got 53 votes, as Chuck Schumer just said. They could do it. Easy. Take 2 minutes. They could do it over the objection of every Democrat. So, this so-called deal that everybody's talking about, yes, we get to interrogate Mick Mulvaney and John Bolton, and you get to interrogate Joe and Hunter Biden. I think it will work to the advantage of the House managers of the impeachment of Trump, and to the disadvantage of Trump himself. In other news, just a few other things going on that I just wanted to flag for you. Donald Trump, according to CBS News, has threatened Republican senators that if they don't vote for him to be acquitted, or at least not to be prosecuted, not to be removed from office, that their heads will be on a pike. A pike, of course, is kind of a big stake or a stick, with a sharp end. And, this is something that they used to do hundreds of years ago. But I would note, as Matt McDermott did in Twitter response, that threatening a juror with physical violence is a felony. Jennifer Rubin tweets, "This is the mob president." So, we'll see. This is why I keep saying it's going to be all or nothing. And not necessarily all, but if a critical threshold of Republicans, and the start of this would be voting for witnesses and documents, if a critical threshold of Republicans start voting in a way that moves toward impeachment, then the majority of the Republicans are going to be faced with two simple choices, and it's This is one of the most binary choices in the history of politics. It's all or nothing. And that is either they vote to acquit Trump and they continue with the Stonewall, or they vote to remove Trump and 20 of them at least join the stampede and Trump is removed from office. Which, frankly, and don't tell any Republicans this, would probably be the best thing they could do looking at the 2020 election. Because while there's lots of people across the country who just, for whom Trump evokes a boiling rage, particularly women, most people are not all that familiar with Mike Pence. Now, Mike Pence's history and politics are actually more extreme than Trump when it comes to things like LGBTQ rights, abortion. I mean, there's just the so-called social issues. But people don't know that. And Pence would just, he would run as kind of the white bread Republican. He would reinvent himself as Mitt Romney. And frankly, if the nominee of the party is particularly if it's Bernie Sanders with the quote socialist label attached to him, I think that I believe that Bernie could beat Pence, but I think he could far more easily beat Trump. And you have to wonder if Republicans are making that equation, particularly as Bernie is going up in the polls right now, as Biden has been going down. So, we'll see where this goes. Final bit of Trump news. Steve Mnuchin has, the foreclosure king was his title when he lived in California. He was running, I think it was One Bank or West Bank or whatever it was. He was running a bank in California. He foreclosed on thousands of people. He threw thousands of Americans out of their homes, apparently gleefully. And apparently illegally, with these signing eviction notices. And Kamala Harris had him in the crosshairs. The California Attorney General's office, when she was AG, this is, back in 2000, whatever it was, 9, 10, 11, she was seriously considering prosecuting him and ultimately decided not to. And frankly, I think, that was very unfortunate. She should have prosecuted him. But this guy who is, a serial criminal, Steve Mnuchin, is now our Treasury Secretary. So, Greta Thunberg came before Davos, and Mnuchin was there. I don't know if he was in the audience, but he certainly knew what was happening. And she said, you guys need to take action. First of all, she said, you rich people need to divest yourself of fossil fuels. And secondly, she said, you need to take action to save the climate and act as if your children and grandchildren's lives were at stake, because they are. So this complete ass, Steve Mnuchin, comes along and says, is she the chief economist? Who is she? I'm confused. Maybe after she goes to college and studies economics in college, she can come back and explain that to us. What a fool. And Greta Thunberg replies on Twitter, my gap year ends in August, but it doesn't take a college degree in economics to realize that our remaining 1.5 degree carbon budget and ongoing fossil fuel subsidies and investments don't add up. So either you tell us how to achieve this mitigation or explain to future generations and those already affected by the climate emergency why we should abandon our climate commitments. And then, Trump, of course, tweeted, so ridiculous, Greta must work on her anger management problem and then go to a good old-fashioned movie. This is bizarre. Anyhow, as I said, it's Anything Goes Friday. I'll pick up your calls after the break. There's actually one more news story I want to share with you. It's like life in America continues, right? You'll get what I'm saying in about 4 minutes. So stick around. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday. We will keep you up to date on what's going on with the impeachment hearings. If you didn't hear Adam Schiff's 10-minute summation last night, check it out.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It was an absolutely brilliant speech. I would be astonished if it's not up in several different versions over on YouTube. His little 10-minute summary last night. Brilliant. And welcome back. Mike in Lomita, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I was getting very depressed about all those senators violating their constitutional oaths by trying to, just cover up this whole thing. But then I got to thinking about a couple of other things that give me a little bit of optimism for the future. One is that you notice that when Jay Sekulow was complaining about lawyer lawsuits, and that was because somebody misheard.
It was
FOIA
Val Deming.
freedom.
She had mentioned FOIA lawsuits, and he thought she was saying lawyer. He completely misunderstood her.
No, I don't think he did. I think Trump was following, and Trump is giving, my minuscule, detailed orders to his defenders, the mark of a really stupid person. And I think that eventually the stupidity of the defense is going to become so egregious that it pops the Foxaganda bubble and starts to leak out to the hardcore Trumpsters. I think that's one of the things that's going to be influencing the 2020 senatorial elections, if we have any.
Rupert Murdoch, Mike, Rupert Murdoch has a 20-year history in Australia, in the United Kingdom, and now in the United States. Or, actually more like a 30 or 40-year history of, peddling lies. Peddling
That's
lies
true.
to benefit the billionaire class, period, full stop. He's not going to stop.
Precisely
Fox
so.
isn't going to stop.
Well, we're not going to say that they're going to stop or that the Republican senators are going to suddenly turn honest.
Right.
What I'm saying is that it's going to be such a newsworthy and noteworthy absurdity that it's going to break through even to people who are Foxaholics. And
I think that's happening in a small way, and it's happening for the people who watch Fox a lot but don't watch it exclusively. But I would be surprised if that is happening at all with people who watch Fox exclusively. I mean, if when you see Trump tweeting complaints about Fox, then you'll know that, that this has happened. And, when he goes to nothing but One American News or one of these other right-wing web-based so-called TV networks. But
well, be that as it may, I'm saying it's a sizable portion of Trump's supporters might be peeling away over time as this becomes a little too obvious and too pervasive.
Oh, I agree, and I think that in the last 3 years, you've seen the number of people, who are registered as Republicans or who identify as Republicans in the polls. While Trump's support remains strong, the number of people who actually call themselves Republicans has been declining. And I think that's a symptom of what you're talking about. And I don't think it's just this impeachment thing. I mean, this is people who've been, they're Republicans in the mold of my dad, the old Eisenhower Republicans. I think they're, our friend who is the moose herder guy, who calls in.
Quite so.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think one of the things that's going to be coming out in very sharp relief is that the U.S. government is now in the position of exporting corruption abroad under this administration.
By example, if nothing else, yes.
No, by demanding that they be corrupt and prosecuting them
you're
if
absolutely
they
right.
are not.
Yeah, Trump was demanding that Ukraine be corrupt, although they have not taken that bait. I mean, they have not done it up to this point. So, excellent points, Mike. I got to run.
How stupid,
Finish your thought real quick.
How stupid Trump is to go after Biden when the two progressives are outpolling him in combination a year and a half before the election.
Yep, there you go. Thanks. Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters Series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. There was one other story I wanted to share with you. This is just like, you know, we've got to come up with a category for these stories, but there's a fellow who lived in Detroit. His name is Senator Thomas. And his employer, and we don't know the details of what happened because it was the lawsuit was settled. He was given a settlement check, a payment, and part of it was a provision in the settlement agreement that he wouldn't talk about it in public. A confidentiality agreement. But he was employed by Enterprise Leasing in Detroit. They lease trucks and stuff like that. And he brought a workplace racial discrimination lawsuit. And they lost. They went to court and they lost. And they had to pay him. And they wrote him a fairly large check. And we don't know how much the check is because, again, that was covered by the confidentiality clause. So he had been banking at TCF Bank in Livonia, Michigan. My oldest child was born at St. Mary's Hospital in Livonia. Louise and I used to live down the road in Westland, which are both suburbs of Detroit. Livonia is a little more upscale. Westland's a little more downscale, but in any case. So he takes this settlement check from his lawsuit for racial discrimination into this bank. And the bank manager says to him, hang on, just stay right there. I need to verify this check, because it's a large check. And she goes in the back room and calls police. And 4 cops arrive, and 2 are waiting outside, and they question this guy, and he says, no, it's a settlement check. Here's my lawyer's phone number. You can call my lawyer. They call his lawyer. She says, yes, it's a settlement check. And the manager of the bank still says, no, we're going to file a police report for check fraud, and we will not deposit this check in your account that you've had with this bank for 2 years. Welcome to America. He is now, by the way, suing the bank. And hopefully he'll get a good-sized settlement because this is just absolutely unacceptable behavior. And the bank issued a statement saying, wow, we just did what we would do with anybody who brought in a large check. We're sorry we inconvenienced him. That was their official statement. Words to that effect. I mean, it's not verbatim, but very close. But he went down the street to another bank and said, hey, this is my check. I am me. Here's my ID. Would you like me to open a checking account here? And if so, will you deposit this? And the other bank said, sure, in a heartbeat. Yeah, so much for TFC or TCF Bank, whatever it is there in Livonia. Anyhow, back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be back in just a few minutes with your calls. What a day. The House impeachment, by the way, or the House impeachment managers, the arguments before the Senate, today are going to focus on obstruction of justice. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls in just a moment. Anything Goes Friday.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Years of strategy and struggle against the prison industrial complex. It's a collection of essays. This one is by David Gilbert on page 31, titled The System Within the System, the Prison Industrial Complex and Imperialism. For those of us held behind locked gates within the walls and fences topped with razor wire, the corrections regime is the system that works tirelessly to impose total control over every aspect of our lives. Yet as ponderous and powerful as prisons are, they're only one part, a central girder, of a much bigger and more foreboding house of horrors, which can most accurately be named imperialism. The structural needs of the larger edifice set the specifications for the size and position of the girder. The strength of the girder helps determine how long the building itself will stand. We can't understand the explosion of imprisonment in the United States since 1971 without looking at an imperialism's urgent needs and goals of that period. By the same token, we can't develop an effective program around the prison industrial complex without grappling with the stresses and trends of the larger system of imperial rule. To be clear, before you take time to read this chapter, I don't offer any brilliant ideas on strategy. Those will most likely emerge from the organizing and activist efforts themselves. However, some of the concerns discussed may raise questions that go into forming strategy. I definitely look forward to learning from the dialogues that this generates on these issues. Imperialism may sound like the kind of rhetoric we want to avoid, but it's one word that needs to be rescued as the best way to name the system that rules over us. The basis of imperialism is the relentless quest for profits around the globe. Its most striking characteristic is the colossal and grotesque polarization of wealth. That polarization happens between nations, between the rich countries of the North and the impoverished ones of the global South, the impoverished countries of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, and at the same time within each country based on class, race, and gender. The poles of dazzling wealth and abject poverty are intimately linked, as the former results from the ruthless plunder of the latter. This system is built on and intensifies all the major forms of oppression, patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, all of which are structurally central. At the same time, imperialism highlights the global character of the system in a way that explains why the most intense oppression and resistance have been in the South, and that also provides the context for why the liberation struggles of the various people of color have been in the forefront within the U.S. There's no way to capture what the system costs in human life and potential, the pain and loss for all of us. Close to 1 billion human beings suffer chronic hunger, while another 2 billion face nutritional deficiencies. 1 billion lack access to clean drinking water. Just looking at children under the age of 5, imperialism is a holocaust in progress. Over 9 million die every year from easily preventable causes associated with poverty. The price for future generations may be even more severe as the rapaciousness of this global frenzy for profits threatens the very ecological basis for sustaining human life on any scale on our planet. Since most people won't accept living in squalor amid plenty, imperialism entails both the most sophisticated and the most brutal forms of social control. Its most salient feature is war, war after war after war, mainly against the peoples of the South. The domestic front line of such repression is a truly violent and harmful prison industrial complex. Today, 2,300,000 people are held behind bars, about 7 times the number in 1971. That explosion was unprecedented, coming after a 70-year period when the rates of imprisonment had remained more or less constant. This dramatic change did not result from some sudden skyrocketing of criminal activity, but rather from a radical expansion of what was designated as a crime and a draconian increase in the punishments for those crimes. Such extreme measures were driven by considerations way beyond criminal justice and often at cross purposes to the proclaimed goal of public safety. These destructive changes were born from crisis, one much more severe and protracted than the periodic ups and downs of the business cycles that occur over a roughly 10-year period, but rather a situation that threatened the very survival of the system. Such structural crises occur because capitalism is by its nature unstable. The economy is vast and complicated, but the major decisions are made by a tiny corporate and financial elite, with each thinking only of his own profits. When a structural crisis develops, the long-term institutional arrangements that assured a reliable flow of profits and the rule of capital no longer function. One dramatic example was the Great Depression of the 1930s, followed by World War II. At the end of that period, a new set of international institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created. At the same time, a new deal was hammered out for the terms of the bargain between capital and labor within the U.S. Those arrangements worked well for capital until they broke down a generation later. That new structural crisis, which emerged between 1968 and 73, is the seedbed for the burgeoning of the prison industrial complex and many related changes in U.S. history. The first and most obvious signs were political, as the resistance to imperialism crested in 1968. Abolition now. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series, after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. First in the series, Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And George in Chicago, it says you disagree with D.C. statehood. Why?
Well, very quickly, before I get to that, it occurs to me that you have been educating us this week about the transfer of nuclear technology to Pakistan.
No, to Saudi Arabia.
To Saudi, yes, but also that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have relations in regards to this, and any nuclear technology that we transmit to Saudi Arabia could easily end up with Pakistan.
And not to mention a few other countries in the region, yes.
Yeah. And Pakistan has been exchanging nuclear technology with North Korea.
Yep.
So for Trump to do this is monstrously irresponsible.
Yeah, in fact, Pakistan has been supplying nuclear technology to North Korea.
Yes.
Not just sharing information. They've actually been supplying them with and I believe some weapon systems or rockets as well. I may be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure some of that stuff came from Pakistan.
But anyway, I've felt for a very long time that it should be integral to the short-term and long-term strategy of the Democratic Party, first to obtain statehood for Puerto Rico. There should be like a permanent organization within the Democratic Party to make this happen. Secondly, since you lived in D.C., you're familiar with the license plate that says taxation without representation along the bottom of it.
Yep.
And as much as I advocate for senators and a congressman from D.C., I don't think it should be an independent state. It's part and parcel of the system of checks and balances that the founders devised, that the federal district not be under the thumb of any state government. It's important that the seat of the federal government be independent of state politics.
Yeah, it was also part and parcel of the founders' ideas that black people should not have, should be property, should be, enslaved, that women should not have any rights. It was part and parcel that the electoral college, should be how presidents are elected. I think that's an anachronism, George. I mean, if you go back and read the kind of hidden history of Washington, D.C., and there's a couple of really good books on this, actually. Ben Franklin was one of the principal architects of this. These guys they were mystics, some of them anyway. And they wanted to have a place where the sacred work of government could be done with reverence and with solemnity, and so they said, okay, we're gonna put some rules into place for this district. First, they created a goddess for America. And that goddess was on our coins from the founding of our republic until Ronald Reagan took her off our coins. That was the Liberty walking, half dollar and quarters and all that kind of stuff. She's in front of the Agriculture Department holding wheat and a scythe. She's in front of the Pentagon, with a handful of arrows and a shield, as I recall. She's in front of the Justice Department holding blindfolded, holding a scale of justice and showing one breast, which John Ashcroft covered up back during the Bush administration. And they named her. They named her. They named her Columbia after, after they named her Columbia, and it's really after Columbus, but I'm reluctant to say that because they thought he discovered America. But in any case, and they put her on top of the Capitol building. They made a rule that no building in D.C. could be taller than her head, and they made a rule that nobody in D.C. can actually have a say in federal politics, because they didn't want these people to be corrupted by political considerations. But the fact of the matter is that the citizens of D.C., the vast majority of them now, are no longer working at the business of government. I mean, at that time, the District of Columbia had a few thousand residents, and now it's got over 1 million. I mean, D.C. has a larger population than Wyoming or Vermont. And Wyoming and Vermont both have 2 senators and a member of the House. And and maybe even a larger population than some of the other less populous states. I don't know these numbers right off the top of my head, but and nobody even remembers that the goddess Columbia is what the district is named after. That it was a sacred district named after a goddess, and that all the sacred architecture that the French architect L'Enfant came up with. This was all based on Masonic stuff, and all that's kind of blown out the window. So let's just make it a state, George.
Well, I think we're not that far apart. I'm absolutely, I don't know if despondent is the right word, that the citizens of the District of Columbia have been without federal representation for so long, and they should absolutely have 2 senators and a congressman. But I just think it's important for the checks and balances that the District of Columbia be governed by the federal government and not another state. I think that would really complicate matters.
No, what has happened with the federal government?
The federal government has to be sovereign in its own seat of government. It's only a small part of the United States.
Then exclude from the district all federal property. So, the White House, the Senate, or the Capitol building, the mall, the Smithsonian buildings, all that federal property in D.C., which is probably 20% of D.C., or maybe, actually, it's probably more like 5%. But in any case, all that federal property, it's already, I guess, federal property pretty much anywhere is somewhat subject to state laws, but, typically federal law trumps state law. But I don't, can you give me even one example of where that sovereignty would become consequential?
Well, if you have a situation where you have 2 sovereign governments occupying the same amount of territory, the number of potential conflicts are endless.
Well, I can give you an example, George. When the District of Columbia, because the District of Columbia has its own government, right? It's a city government. You've got a city council and you've got a mayor. And when the city of D.C. decided that they were going to legalize marijuana, the one congressman, Andy Harris from Maryland, as I recall, stood up in Congress and said, "No, you can't do that." And so, and D.C. said, well, we're going to do it anyway. And he said, then we're going to forbid you from allowing the sale of marijuana. So, D.C. legalized pot for recreational purposes, but you can't buy it or sell it. So you've got this weird thing in D.C. right now, and there's websites devoted to this, and where you go on, you go into these. Most of it's all done on the internet, or it wasn't. I don't know the status right now because we moved back here almost 3 years ago. But you go on this website where there's all these works of art that are done by DC artists, and their prices start around $50 or $60, and they go up to several $100s. You buy a work of art, and as a gift from this nonprofit organization that's selling the work for these artists, and half the money goes to the artists. When you buy a work of art, you get as a gift a quarter ounce of pot or a couple of grams of pot, and they deliver it to your home. Here's your painting, here's your pot, and it's all legal. But Andy Harris created this. This is where two sovereigns came into conflict with each other: the federal government and the state and the city government of D.C. And because they don't have statehood, they didn't have the ability, like Colorado and Oregon and other states have, Michigan now, Illinois now, to say no, we're going to allow the legalization and sale of it. It just can't go beyond our borders, because then you're passing into the realm where the federal government has say, because anything that involves interstate commerce is clearly in the purview of the federal government because of the interstate commerce clause in the Constitution.
Well, I think the bottom line is that we both agree that just for the sake of simple equity in this country, we need 2 more senators from Puerto Rico and 2 from D.C. and 2 more members of the House, because as I think we all know, for the last several elections, the total number of votes for Democrats in the House and Senate have significantly exceeded that of the Republicans, and yet the Republicans managed to hold majorities too much of the time.
Yeah, in large part because of gerrymandering.
This would help the imbalance.
In large part because of gerrymandering in the House, and in large part because of all the low population, so-called conservative states in the Senate. But yeah, you're right. George, thank you for the call. Michael in Denver. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Good morning, Tom.
Hey,
it's really interesting. I was calling up here because I've gone to 2 meetings, and I'm noting from the people that I'm associated with and that I've talked to that we might be seeing a shift here in the American public. And
what kind of meetings did you go to that informed you of this?
A union meeting, and I'm not going to go into it. I've mentioned it before, but
okay.
A union meeting, skilled labor, whatever. And then Bernie opened up an office here in Denver on Tuesday, and they invited people down, and I went down, and I was surprised because I'm one of these people that supported Bernie at the beginning, but when Hillary got the nomination, I went, full tilt boogie to support and get out the vote for her.
So did I.
And I believe there are many more Bernie people that are like me than the ones that you hear, are out there creating, this media-driven.
The Bernie or die. I get it.
But what I wanted to say is, George, I don't think you're Puerto Rican, George. The vast majority of people, and I am Puerto Rican, so vast majority of people down in Puerto Rico really believe that the way the system has been for them as an associated territory of the United States is the best way for them to go. They're not that. They are not that.
They're not that into statehood.
Voting, and everything else is important, but
given the way that the Trump administration for 3 years now has been aggressively screwing Puerto Rico, withholding funds, just all kinds of just vicious stuff because the mayor of San Juan spoke poorly of him and all that kind of stuff. I would think that might be shifting public opinion in Puerto Rico, and they would want to say, yes, we want to have statehood so we can fight back.
Well,
or national sovereignty, complete independence, one or the other.
Yeah. Exactly. But Puerto Rico is sometimes seen as like the little cousin of Cuba. And, you see what happened to Cuba. They had a socialist revolution there and they brought, poverty. They tried to sweep poverty out of the country and nationalize, their industries and everything. Puerto Rico is much smaller. But the whole thing is that attitude of el americano as I say, the American is the boss here. Es el jefe aquí is something that grates and has grated the Puerto Rican and in the Caribbean region.
Right.
It's grated people because they see Americans as being heavy-handed and everything else. The tourist industry, what happened to Cuba in the 50s with the mafia and all that. The one thing I do want to leave you with, Tom, I know I've gone a little long, but I do want to say this. Great movie, Tora, about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. And Admiral Yamamoto at the end of the movie says to his staff, What I fear is that we have awoken a sleeping giant that is full of resolve. And I think right now the American people are the sleeping giant, and maybe we've been nudged and we're starting to open up one eye.
Cool.
To what's going on.
From your lips to God's ears,
Listening to
Michael.
Thom
Thank you.
Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back with more of your calls on Anything Goes Friday. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Let's see here. Britt in Eureka, California, listening on KGO. Oh, you're listening to a commercial station. Let me put you on hold and I'll pick you up back when KGOE is on the air. My apologies. Trish in Los Angeles. Hey, Trish, thanks for listening to KPFK. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just love your show, and you're so informative and so well evolved on all of these, all of our political issues of the day. And I, too, am an expat from Michigan, and Detroit in particular. So when you shout out to Michigan, I love it. Here's my comment for the day. What concerns me about having the Bidens.
About what? I'm sorry, I missed that word.
The Bidens.
Oh, okay. The Bidens testifying, you mean?
Yeah, I'm really concerned that whatever they say will be taken by Trumpaganda or Fox News and then really perverted to look like, and they will use that as a talking point in the election.
I think you can count on that, but right now it looks like, I mean, not from my point of view, it looks like they're trying to cover something up. But I guarantee you, from the people who watch Fox News, and even probably a lot of people watching CNN, because this point keeps getting made by people like Rick Santorum on CNN, that there is a cover-up going on by the Bidens.
I just really don't understand why people like Rick Santorum even have any relevance right now.
Well, I agree with you on that.
It pains me to see them dredge up all these guys. Who next? Paul Ryan?
I know, and Rick Santorum, the guy who put the pickled miscarriage semi-zygote or whatever it was in a jar and put it on the mantle of his living room, for his kids. I mean, this guy is so bizarre.
I totally forgot about that, but geez, what a bunch of clowns. And they keep bringing them out to give them a point of view, and I think, why? Yeah. Why are they doing that?
Because CNN, MSNBC has given up any pretense of being fair and balanced. They basically just have Democrats on as guests. Fox never had, I mean, they called it fair and balanced, but they finally, got rid of Alan Colmes, may he rest in peace, a good guy and a good friend who passed away a year or three ago. But, Fox has given up any semblance of fair and balanced. But CNN is still trying to pretend, pretend is the wrong word. CNN is still trying to actually be the network that delivers real news, kind of, Wolf Blitzer news, and even in commentary has both sides. So maybe having a buffoon like Rick Santorum be the guy who's presenting the Republican side is the better thing for our side than if they had somebody who was a little slicker and smarter than Rick Santorum.
Oh, my God, that's such an interesting point of view. I just think he should stay down at the bottom of the ocean, of the swamp. Yeah, but instead of letting. But if you got a really smart and really articulate Republican on there instead of Rick Santorum, I think they could do a lot more damage. Schmidt. Yeah, Steve Schmidt. Yeah, Steve. Love that guy. Yeah, right now Steve Schmidt hates Trump, but when Trump is gone, Steve Schmidt is going to go back to we need to privatize Social Security, we need to do away with Medicare, we need to cut taxes, we need to end the corporate income tax. He's going to go back to all the stuff that he was selling before, as are all these other Republicans like Joe Scarborough and MSNBC and Nicole Wallace. And things are going to change after, when Trump is gone in the media landscape, and it's going to be real interesting to watch. Trish, I'm sorry we're out of time, but fascinating conversation. Thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you, and thanks for listening to KPFK. It's 52 minutes past the hour.
Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Hey, just a real quick thing here that I want to note and share with you all. Last year, Louise and I went on a cruise to Alaska. It was the cruise line we went with was real expensive. But about 20 some odd folks who listen to the show or watch the show joined us, and we had a wonderful time, an absolutely wonderful time. We hung out with people. We were, available to people all day, every day, pretty much, and had a lot of dinners together and took some tours together. And we're doing that again this summer to Bermuda, and Bermuda is like at the same latitude as New York, more or less, or a little south of that. But it's actually a nice place to visit in the summer. And there's going to be a couple of days at sea where we can hang out. We'll have some events scheduled and stuff like that. So Kristen Evans is on the line with us. She's the Luxury Cruise Specialist Manager with Keen Luxury Travel. This is a cruise that is co-sponsored by our station, WCPT, in Chicago. And KeenLuxuryTravel.com is the website. And Kristen, welcome to the program, or welcome back.
Hi,
I think
Tom.
you were with us a year ago when we were talking about this. And
yeah, I was. Hi, thanks for having me.
so this year we decided to stay with essentially a high-end cruise line, Oceania, and we can't discuss actual dollar amounts or have any call to action in this conversation. But we decided to stay with a high-end cruise line, but with one that is dramatically less expensive, shall we say. And last year it wasn't Oceania. This year it's Oceania. And what's the ship like? Tell us about the ship.
So I think Oceania is a great selection for this year's cruise and is going to give you that same luxurious feel, but it's a super relaxed environment. The ship's only 684 passengers. They offer really good personalized service on board, as well as top-notch cuisine. So when you travel with your group, you guys are going to really experience just a high-quality level of service, but a real comfortable atmosphere. You won't be standing in lines to get on and off the ship. You're not going to be waiting to go to dinner. They've got 5 different restaurants on board, and with 4 unique open seating restaurants. So there's not early and late dining. It's really dine on your own time. And they just offer a really good product, so you get that high quality of service, but not for that high price.
Yeah, agreed. And I think this is I'm really looking forward to this. And I was kind of passing through Bermuda once, but I've never played tourist in Bermuda, so I'm really looking forward to this. And there's an extraordinary history there. They also have pink beaches, as I recall. Why is that?
Yeah, the pink sand beaches are one of the iconic things of Bermuda, so it's not to be missed if you go. But the pastel color actually comes from a combination of white coral and shells and a red single-cell organism that actually makes the sands pink.
Huh! That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
And St. George, is that the capital city?
It is, and it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it will be your example of an English colonial town, but it's really the history of St. George is really neat with the rum runners and the pirates and how it was settled. So,
well, it was settled in the early 1600s, wasn't it? About the same time Jamestown was, or a little after that, but.
It was at the same time by the English.
Yeah, because it's on the way. I mean, we're not talking the Caribbean. We're up here, and this is in the middle of the Atlantic, essentially, or not the middle, but off. So. Yeah,
it's quite a ways off the coast. So I think the English must have got there and said, "Hey, it's really nice here. Let's stay."
Yeah,
who needs to go to the rest?
Yeah, because we're going to be 2 days
mainland?
at sea to get there, and 2 days at sea or a day at sea, I guess, to get back. And so I'm looking forward to this. There's more information up at the top of ThomHartmann.com. You can check it out. Kristen Evans is with Keen Luxury Travel, who is organizing this thing on behalf of us in WCPT. And Kristen, thanks so much for dropping by.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tom.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back. It's Anything Goes Friday, and that's our last guest for the day. I will be taking your calls for the next 2 hours. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present, by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, M.D., as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty. His Grecian visage inspired oil portraits. And in 1875, he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he at first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and morning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. Two other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane." In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African-American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Just a heads up here. I mentioned earlier, more or less at the start of the last hour, that I thought that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden should not be at all concerned about testifying before the Senate. And in fact, it might be a good thing for Joe Biden, for his candidacy for president. Seth Abramson just tweeted, Adam Schiff warned America last night that Trump might do with China, agreeing to a clandestine deal to get dirt on Biden, not just inviting but accepting foreign election interference. What he tried to do in Ukraine. The problem, he already did. And this is, he's referencing an article in CNN. And you can find this, you can Google this or DuckDuckGo at October 3rd, 2019, October 3rd of last year, about, 3 months ago. And the headline is, Trump raised Biden with Xi, Xi, the president of China, in June call housed in highly secure server. And this is by Kyle Atwood, Kevin Liptak, Pamela Brown, Jim Sudo, and Gloria Borger. And they write, when Trump suggested without prompting that China should investigate Joe Biden and his son, you recall that was one of those, helicopter things out in front of the White House. That wasn't the first time. During a phone call in June, now we're going back 7 months, in a phone call in June, on June 18th, with President Xi of China, Trump raised Biden's political prospects as well as those of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Trump told Xi that he would remain quiet on the Hong Kong protests as the trade talks were moving along. So he's trying to cut a deal with Xi. We will stab in the back the people who are calling for democracy in Hong Kong in exchange for, you helping us economically so that I can look good and get reelected. That call was later stored in that highly secure electronic system, air-gapped electronic system in the White House, where he also stashed the conversation with President Zelensky, this 20-minute conversation that we've got a 10-minute transcript of. And again, from the article, Trump's reluctance over the summer to speak out against a crackdown against pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong has frustrated officials at the National Security Council and State Department who had been advocating a firmer U.S. stance. So again, like I said, Trump is willing to sell out democracy in exchange for something that's going to make him look good. But it goes way beyond that. Some of the president's advisors, now this, keep in mind, this was in October that this was published. CNN published this article. Some of the president's advisors say they believe China is watching the Democratic primary closely. On several occasions, Trump has intimated that the Bidens received millions of dollars from China. And at fundraisers and sometimes in his rallies, he said this. And what he's talking about is back in 2013, Joe Biden, as vice president, made a trip to China, and his son Hunter and his son's either wife or daughter went along with him to Beijing. And his son Hunter was a member of has a 10% interest in BHR Partners, a private equity fund, and the Chinese government, their Bank of China, had invested in that. And so this is what Trump is talking about. A bunch of money went into this fund apparently after the trip. But Hunter has come right out and said, I received no money from that fund or in connection with this role, with my role as an unpaid advisory board member. CNN goes on to say there's no evidence the former vice president received money from China. And last week, one of Hunter Biden's lawyers told the Washington Post that he hadn't received any, quote, return or compensation on account of this investment or his position on the board of directors, end quote. But Mike Pence came out and said, the president has made it very clear that he believes that other nations around the world should look into this as well, this being Joe Biden. He went on to say, this is Pence, the simple fact is, when you hold the second highest office in the land, it comes with unique responsibilities, not just to be above impropriety, but to be above the appearance of impropriety. And then this is where it gets really interesting. CNN reported last October, 3 months ago, and I quote, privately, Trump has been telling allies he believes Hunter Biden's activities in China are potentially far more damaging than his business in Ukraine. At a private event in New York City, Trump, speaking of Hunter Biden in China, speaking of Hunter Biden in Ukraine, he says, that's not the best one. Best one is China. Now, this is kind of ironic, given that when President Xi came over here and hung out with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, he brought with him a bunch of trademarks for Ivanka Trump. Right, Ivanka Trump has made millions of dollars in China, is continuing to make money in China, and even got a trademark or a patent for voting machines in China, for goodness sakes. But this causes me to think that if Joe Biden is our candidate, if he's the guy who gets the Democratic Party's nomination, then, and let's say Ukraine is completely put to bed, this whole impeachment thing, is so well done by the Democrats that nobody thinks that Hunter Biden was, that it was improper or that Joe Biden had any improper influence or anything like that. Trump is going to trot out China. And he's signaling right now that that's his plan. This is his October surprise plan if Joe Biden is the nominee. And he's also talked to President Xi about Elizabeth Warren. And this was back when she was really climbing in the polls very rapidly, back about 3 months ago. So I think we're starting to see the outline of how, of the Trump smear campaign. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday. Nathan in West Los Angeles. Hey, Nathan, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Back at you.
Hey, I just wanted to call since it was Anything Goes Friday and put in a plug for Taiwan. I just didn't want anyone to have an adverse opinion about Taiwan after you talked about the night markets yesterday.
Oh, those are all over Asia. I mean, we saw the same thing in Thailand. We saw the same thing in the Philippines. I lived in Beijing for a month back in '86. Never saw a night market there, but I'm sure that they had them.
But in Taiwan, I've spent months there over the last 5 to 10 years. The night markets in Taiwan, they're not like that anymore. Not in Taiwan. They're
all cleaned up and tourist trapped kind of places now.
Well, not quite tourist trapped, but they're much nicer. I mean, Taiwan's come leaps and bounds in the last 20 to 30 years.
Yeah. And I was there in the 80s.
Right. Incredible strides in technology, tourism. Tourism is huge to their economy.
Yeah.
And I've been all over the country, in the mountains, on the coast, in the major cities, high-speed rail that connects Kaohsiung to Taipei. You spend a month in Taiwan, and you'll wish America was more like Taiwan. I mean, if you could get from LA to San Francisco in an hour on a high-speed rail, DC to New York, Vegas to LA, the assist that would put into our economy.
Oh, yeah.
I had a wisdom tooth pulled in Taiwan at one point. As a non-citizen, it cost me $50. I had panoramic x-rays on my mouth, wisdom tooth pulled, $50 for a non-citizen.
Wow.
It's an incredible country. And
it's a beautiful country. And the most amazing thing for me when Louise and I were there as tourists at one point was that museum. I mean, when I want to say Chiang Kai-shek, was that the guy who fled?
Correct.
Yeah, who founded Taiwan. When he fled China, he and his merry band, I mean, they were the last of the capitalists in China, and they fled to Taiwan, and they took a lot of loot with them. And there's so much treasure there that they've got this giant warehouse that's built into the side of a mountain, and every 3 months they change all the exhibits in this huge museum. I mean, it takes at least a whole day to walk through this museum, and it goes back thousands of years of Chinese history, and it's just amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I spent about a week in Tairoga, which is up in the mountains in the historic, where they have native, because of course there's the native Taiwanese who have been there much longer, like our Native Americans, than the Chinese who came over from China. And as a geeky science moment, one thing I found fascinating there was all of the art and the photographs they had of the native Taiwanese reminded me more of our Native Americans than of any.
Yeah, these were Aboriginal people,
culture. I mean,
indigenous people.
Yeah,
yes.
It felt like pre-continental divide kind of stuff. I mean, face paint, totem poles. It was like they felt more closely related to our Native Americans than to Native Asians. It was pretty fascinating to kind of see that, like, oh, the world used to all be one solid mass of land. Yeah,
I love Taiwan. If you have an opportunity to visit Taiwan as a tourist, I strongly recommend it. Nathan, thanks for that. Thanks for bringing us up to date, shall we say. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
It's great to hear from you. Thank you. Marilyn in Sun City, West Arizona. Hey, Marilyn, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm just a little nervous talking to you, but a couple of things. I listen to your show all the time. I never heard you speak back in December, but it was curious to me that Kim Jong-un said that denuclearization was off the table in negotiations with the U.S., which he claimed was a, quote, time-saving trick to benefit Trump's political agenda. So I'm wondering if he wasn't also approached for dirt on whoever. But the thing that I actually called about was the Biden swap with witnesses. And NBC News came out with an op-ed a couple of days ago or last week that said that they're not sure that couldn't backfire, because even though they could make that swap on paper, the White House doesn't have to agree to it, and the White House could maybe drag it through the courts, and it could end up being because.
Yeah, I get that, Marilyn, but here, keep in mind, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is presiding over this, and this was part of Chuck Schumer's speech this morning. He said that if the president asserts executive privilege on any of these witnesses, specifically they were talking about Mulvaney and Bolton. If he asserts executive privilege, the Chief Justice the next morning can go back to the Supreme Court and say, we're going to expedite this, we're going to hold a hearing on this right now, we're going to rule on this afternoon. And boom, it's done.
Because he did say that Bolton he's pulling the national security problem card.
Yes, I agree. And the other point that I would make is, there are people, one of the arguments that I've heard and that I've read actually, is that, Biden and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden should not testify before the Senate because, they might be smeared, or there may be something in their past that could be misconstrued, even if everything is wonderful, and therefore it would hurt his chances in the election. If there is anything like that, it's already going to be used in the election. I guarantee it, 100%. So we should learn right now. I mean, if he's going to be so vulnerable that he could be taken down by Trump in the general election, he should not be our nominee. And if he's not that vulnerable, we should get that out right now, in my opinion.
Got it.
Yeah. Marilyn, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. It's 18 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Anything Goes Friday. We'll be right back with more of your calls. And welcome back. Lou in Pueblo, Colorado, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Lou, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I thought I'd relate something. Before I say anything about it, I want to stress that the companies involved are not the crooks. They're just the convenient people to run the grift, okay? This is something I talked with Greg Palast about back in 2016. He was going to look into it, but then he got buried under an avalanche of election fraud, which will take, you know how that goes.
Yep.
Anyway, my history a little bit, I've worked in 150 countries all over the world. I've run into and made friends with intelligence operatives in a number of agencies from a number of countries. So this is how I got a special invite. I've actually helped the CIA. I don't work for them. And in 2003 or 4, when the invasion in Iraq and Afghanistan was going on, I was invited to a special presentation in Houston by Halliburton. And the deal was they had a number of scams. I'll just describe one. We would buy 2 trucks from Halliburton for $4 million, pick them up in either Afghanistan or Iraq. We had guaranteed contracts for 2 years that would pay off the $4 million, plus we had to hire armed guards. We had to pay $80 a gallon for diesel. If the trucks were blown up, the Army would buy us new ones. So our profit was guaranteed. We would make $1 million each. I was working with a former operative in an intelligence agency, and this proposal was made there, and we would make about $1 million a year each. For our 2 years, Halliburton would make about $8 million over the 2 years. And like I say, Halliburton was simply the vehicle chosen. It wasn't their idea. They were used to do it.
Well, my understanding is that when Dick Cheney became vice president, because of the stupid deal he had made, having Halliburton buy Dresser Industries back in '99, I think it was,
That's correct.
And Dresser Industries had this huge asbestos liability. That asbestos liability went to Halliburton, and Halliburton was literally on the verge of bankruptcy in early 2000. And so as soon as Cheney had an opportunity after 9/11, they started pushing these no-bid contracts at Halliburton. And Cheney, of course, owned, I believe, hundreds of thousands of shares of Halliburton stock. He owned a large chunk of Halliburton stock because he was the CEO. And CEOs are typically compensated with stock as well as cash. And his stock was worth virtually nothing. By the time he left office 8 years later, his stock was worth, as I recall, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right, but he had to put it in escrow while he was in office. So
which doesn't matter. If you're going to hold stock, you can just, put it in escrow.
Who's going to sell at a loss?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So did you end up in Afghanistan?
No, I turned it down. There were a number of offers, running a infrastructure, rebuilding a water plant where there no pipe or, welding rods ever showed up. They all paid $1 million a year tax-free deposit in a foreign bank account. And
you mean to you as an employee, as a worker?
As the owner of the company. We had to form a corporation. It was all deposited in Singapore, Switzerland, or wherever you wanted.
Wow.
It was legal. There was nothing illegal about it, but ethically I couldn't do it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Lou, thanks for the story. It's fascinating insight. Lou, thank you very much, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Stick around. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Gustavo in Santa Barbara, California. My pleasure.
And I hope that soon you come to Santa Barbara.
Hey, Gustavo, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thank you for taking my call.
I would love to. It's a beautiful city.
Yes.
In fact, my agent lives there.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're going to be waiting for you here.
Thanks.
My question is, how is it that these two giants, got away without paying any taxes? I'm talking about Amazon and Starbucks. And, just the regular citizen, I mean, if you owe a penny, they will probably take you to prison. Well, I'm exaggerating.
They'll pursue you to the end of the earth, yes. I get it. The reason why Amazon and Starbucks and something like somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 100 other of the Fortune 500 companies, I think, paid nothing in taxes last year, and in fact, many of them got massive, multi-million, and in some cases, multi-billion-dollar refunds from the federal government, is very simple. It's Republican tax policy. It started with Reagan, was put on steroids by George W. Bush. These are the things that caused our budget deficit right now and our national debt. Had Reagan not started this process, if you simply take out the Reagan tax cut, the Bush tax cut, and the Trump tax cut, if those had never happened, the budget would have been relatively balanced. I mean, when Reagan came into office, the national debt was $800 billion, less than $1 trillion. And, we would still have, and Clinton had a balanced budget, Carter had a balanced budget. We would still have a balanced budget if it wasn't for these giant tax cuts. And then when you add those wars, Afghanistan and Iraq, on top of that, which have totaled so far about $6 trillion, you can see why the country is so deeply in debt. So this is just insane policy that the Republicans have been pursuing since 1980. When the Supreme Court in 76 and 78, and I write about this in my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court, The Betrayal of America, when the Supreme Court said, if billionaires or corporations want to own individual politicians, that is not bribery, that is not corruption, that is now officially, as of 1976 and 1978, 76 for billionaires, 78 for corporations, that is First Amendment protected free speech. And so those billionaires can own as many, and then with the McCutcheon decision, just a couple of years ago, I think it was 2013, they had originally put a limit on the number of politicians that a billionaire or a corporation could own. I think it was something like 20 or something. And now you can own, every single member of Congress if you want. And then Citizens United in 2010, of course, doubled down on all that. So, basically when that happened in 76 and 78, the Republican Party said, the Democrats are in Fat City with all the unions. They're getting all this money from the unions. We don't have a relationship with the unions, so we are for sale. Now, keep in mind, this was in the echo of the Nixon impeachment. The Republican Party was in shambles. And so they said, we are for sale. We will take money from any billionaire or any corporation that wants to give it to us, and we will do your work for you. And after the Supreme Court legalized this in 76 and 78, that led to 79 and 80, which was the election of Reagan, and Republicans having a comeback in the House and Senate eventually as a result of that. And today, the logical outcome of all that is Donald Trump. The corrupt party now has a corrupt president, and not that Bush and Reagan weren't corrupt, but this is a whole new level, a whole new realm. But that's why these companies are not paying taxes, Gustavo, is simply because the law was changed so they don't have to, and the law was changed because these companies are putting millions of dollars into the pockets of these politicians and their campaigns and their PACs and their super PACs and giving them luxurious vacations and flying them all around the world and all this other kind of stuff. Gustavo, thank you for the call. We're at peak Citizens United right now. That's what's going on. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Anything Goes Friday on the place where smart people get their news. The Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Health care is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Health care is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Health care is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest health care program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18 and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
White House computer security chief. His name is Dimitrios Vistakis. Good Greek name there. He earlier this week. This is a story that I have not seen pretty much anywhere. I just saw. It was flagged by somebody over on DU, and the Office of the Chief Information Security Officer, according to him, has been targeted by White House leadership for removal. He apparently, and he just resigned. And in the process of resigning, now keep in mind, our election infrastructure is under attack. We know that hackers from several different countries, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the countries that Seth Abramson in his Proof of Conspiracy book says, worked to get Trump into the White House in 2016 behind the scenes, that these countries have already gotten inside the election infrastructure of several states, particularly Florida. And so you would think that the White House would be wanting to do something about that. Keep in mind that the Pentagon had asked Trump not for a space force, but for a cyber force. They wanted a new form of, a new branch of the military that would fight wars to be one that would fight cyber wars, because that's probably going to be the next big battlefield. And by cyber wars, I'm not talking about, hacking an election computer. I mean, that's pretty bad. But I'm talking about, shutting down the city of New York, turning off the electricity by hacking all the power plants, shutting off the water by hacking the water system. Most of our infrastructure is online all across the United States. And the Chinese have penetrated much of it. The Russians have penetrated much of it. The Iranians are very good at this. The Iranians have been inside some of our infrastructure. So, there's this office of the Office of the Chief Information Security Officer, the OCISO, within the White House. And the guy in charge, Dimitrios Vistakis, resigned earlier this week, and this is from his resignation letter. Quote, "They say that history repeats itself. Unfortunately, given all the changes I've seen in the past few months, I foresee the White House is posturing itself to be electronically compromised once again, allowing for a large portion of institutional knowledge to concurrently walk right out the front door seems contrary to the best interests of the mission and the organization as a whole." This was obtained by Axios. And it has to do with the 2014 breach when President Obama was in the White House, where the White House was breached by, I don't recall whom, but he says his office was implemented to prevent things like that from happening again. And he also writes, also of concern is the metric leadership is leveraging to gauge success of the cybersecurity program, measuring the success of your security staff by the frequency major compromises are identified versus the duration of time since the last compromise is absurd. And so basically he's saying, the way that the Trump administration is even looking at this stuff is absurd. Pretty amazing stuff. Anyhow, Anything Goes Friday. Britt in Eureka, California. Hey, Britt, what's up?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it, Tom.
Sure.
Yeah, what I wanted to call about was, I guess, I'm not convinced as great of a job as the Democrats are doing in this impeachment trial in the Senate. I'm not convinced that they're going to get a vote that will remove the president. So what I guess I want to say is that we really need to just focus on getting behind the nominee. And I really think that's the way this election is going to be won, is to really consolidate behind the nominee. I have watched myself none of the Democratic debates because none of it matters. Any candidate up there is really fine for me. I'll go for any of them.
That simplifies things, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
I like the debates.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say, really, it just comes down to 3 words: just beat Trump. We can believe in any of those candidates to do the right thing, and I do believe that they will. And I
agree. I am totally vote blue no matter who, although my favorite candidates are Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and not necessarily in that order. But I cannot think of a single person, even Mike Bloomberg, who I would not vote for when up against either Donald Trump or Mike Pence. And I agree with you that in all probability Trump is not going to be removed from office. As I said earlier, it's going to be all or nothing, and if it's all, it's going to be a breaking of a dam, and it's going to happen probably in a matter of hours. And I think it's unlikely. It's a remote possibility. But even if that happens, then it's going to be our Democratic candidate against Mike Pence. I'm with you. Thanks a lot for the call, Britt. Good to hear from you. Gary in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Tom, I was just hoping that you could provide a little light on a subject, a little clarity for me, regarding the talking point that I've heard a lot lately come up again, which is, quote unquote, Bernie bros sat out the 2016 election.
That phrase is a slur that was being promulgated by the Clinton campaign back during the primary. Although there are some men who support Bernie who have behaved badly on Twitter. I have certainly seen it. And when Bernie lost the primary and became the person who was most aggressively campaigning for Hillary Clinton, Bernie gave more speeches to more people on behalf of Hillary Clinton's candidacy than any other person in the United States except Tim Kaine. But nonetheless, on Twitter, every week or so, somebody will come along and go, oh, yeah, Hartmann supported Clinton, And, yeah, after Bernie dropped out, I mean, I had endorsed Bernie up until he lost the primary. And then, you got to move on with life. But in any case, Gary, back to you. I'm sorry.
I know. I know to some extent that people did sit out, right? But I guess I'm looking forward to what extent. I have a hard time buying that argument.
No, that's not what cost Clinton the election. What cost Clinton the election was foreign interference in our election. The Republican secretaries of state in Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania and probably a number of other states as well, throwing hundreds of thousands of people off the voting rolls. Which is election fraud, in my opinion. And then, the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't run the very best campaign, but she did get 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. She should be in the White House right now, period, full stop. So,
thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Good to hear from you. Let's see here. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how are you? I actually have a question about Hillary, too. What do you think of her latest comments about, Bernie Sanders saying he's unlikable, unpopular, nobody can work for him, he's an establishment politician, and that, he's not popular?
I think they're unfortunate. There has been an effort. President Obama made some semi-disparaging remarks about Bernie, apparently in a private meeting, but they were leaked to the public, about a month ago? And now Hillary Clinton making these comments in public. She ran against him in a primary and I think probably to this day she thinks that had he not challenged her in the primary, she would be president right now, which may be the case. I mean, the story is that Jimmy Carter would have gotten reelected in 1980 had Ted Kennedy not challenged him, and that that's a kind of accepted wisdom. So she's feeling burned. She's entitled to her opinion. I don't think there's that many people who are going to make decisions based on that. I'm sorry?
Do you think Bernie Sanders can still win the Democratic primary against Joe Biden?
I do. Although I think that Joe Biden might win against Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's going to depend on the kind of campaigns these guys continue to run and, what the American people think about all of it. My point is that I don't think that Hillary Clinton's opinion is going to be, the people who will follow Hillary Clinton's opinion are probably already the people who are going to vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think that she's going to, by saying that, I don't think she's going to be peeling primary voters away from Bernie Sanders. In fact, if anything, she may, by making those comments, she may cause some of the Bernie Sanders supporters who otherwise thought, I'm not going to vote in the primary, to say now, yes, I'm going to show up in the primary. I'm upset. So, we'll see how it shakes out, but that's my opinion. Dennis, thanks for the call. It's coming up on 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're right here.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And we'll be back with more of Anything Goes Friday in just a moment. And welcome back. Lowell in Salem, Oregon, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Lowell, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I wanted to disagree with you a little bit about characterizing Republicans as being the only ones who, attacked Social Security, because we have the three branches of government are co-equal, and Democrats controlled the House during the 80s. So all those tax cuts and the attacks on Social Security had to go through the House as well.
Right, but if you go back and you look at those votes, Lowell, and I'm running on a 30-year-old memory, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. In fact, I'd be willing to bet a book that I'm right. The majority of the votes did not come from Democrats; they came from Republicans, and a minority of the Democrats voted for those things.
Right, but see, there's always just enough Democrats to vote.
I get that, and that's
things passed,
and that's the thing that's changing right now, and I'm very pleased to see it. I mean, the Progressive Caucus today is 3 times the size it was back then.
But Johnson, remember Johnson? Really, he ousted senators who voted against him.
Oh, of course.
He held a strong line, and it.
That's my, if I may interrupt, that's my riff from a couple of days ago. I don't know if you caught it, where I said what Donald Trump is doing right now, if Donald Trump is not impeached, what it does is massively strengthen the presidency. And we've had 2 Democratic presidents in the last century who have used raw power in a way that allowed them to change the economic and political landscape of America. That was Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson. These guys, Franklin Roosevelt had been the governor of New York, one of the most corrupt states in the Union at the time, and LBJ had been the leader of the Senate. He had Mitch McConnell's job. These guys knew how to use power. They knew how to make threats and follow through on them, and they knew how to make promises and reward people. And the next president, if it's a Democrat, whether it's Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg or Amy Klobuchar, the next president has to be willing to use power the way that Trump is using power to get a progressive agenda passed, or it ain't going to happen.
Exactly. But I heard one of the strategies of the Democrats in the 80s from a local Democrat was that they gave everything Republicans wanted to show voters how bad Republicans were.
No,
I'm not sure if the Democrats are still using that strategy.
No, Lowell, to the best of my knowledge, I've never heard that ever. People made that, that's the Susan Sarandon argument for voting for Jill Stein in 2016, was that, well, Trump will get into office and people will see how terrible the Republicans are and they'll never hold electoral office again, which may actually come out to be true. But I was not hearing that back in the 80s, and I was paying attention. I think what you had was in the late 70s, in the middle of the Carter administration, that was when Maggie Thatcher got elected. And Carter in 78 and in 79 and 1980 started, he privatized or deregulated rather, the trucking industry, the airline industry. I mean, he was moving in this neoconservative direction in his last 2 years. And, because everybody was looking at Maggie Thatcher going, oh, that's cool. And then Reagan, went full on, and then Clinton continued in that direction, and then Obama just kind of maintained the status quo. So I think that was the beginning of the corruption of the Democratic Party by the neoconservatives and the neoliberals, really. Lowell, I got to run, but thanks for the call. We'll be right back. So we have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at ThomHartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of... And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Robbie in Portland. Hey, Robbie, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
I don't want to switch gears too much, but I
feel free. It's Anything Goes Friday.
About Martin Luther King Jr. and his assassination. What do you feel about Lloyd Jowers?
I don't. The expert on that is my writing partner, Lamar Waldron, who wrote a book. We wrote a book together, but Lamar is really the expert on that. You'd have to ask him. I'm not familiar with the name, Robbie. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's all right. I wasn't sure. Basically, the King family in 1999 sued Lloyd Jowers, who on his deathbed basically said that he's the guy who owned the restaurant across from the hotel. On his deathbed, he said that he was hired by a mafia person who then allowed, once he was hired by this mafia individual to allow them to kill Martin Luther King, there was CIA, government people. Basically, this 1999 case saw that the King family sued Lloyd Jowers based off the wrongful death lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And a jury of 12 people, 6 white, 6 black people, came to the conclusion that the Memphis police and the FBI conspired to kill Martin Luther King. The King family then decided to drop the $1 million or $100 million or $10 million lawsuit against Jowers and made it $100 to show that it was mostly they just wanted justice done because Lloyd Jowers was on his death.
Wow.
But a lot of people don't know. And there's a Washington Post, I believe, or New York Times article written in 1999 talking about it. And one of the people there, I forget what it was, but something had overshadowed the entire trial. So there was no news outlets that covered it, nothing at all. And basically it just got swept right under the thing. And we're now waiting we're still waiting with the rest of the Kennedy files that are locked up in the United States.
Yeah,
State
and Lamar is all over that. We'll get him on again, one of these days. He comes on, for the holidays and things to talk about these things. And his knowledge of the King assassination is really, really deep because he grew up in Atlanta, and the guys who put the assassination together lived right up the road from him. And his dad, in fact, worked at the same factory one of them did. So, Lamar's got he's got the whole scoop on that. I'm more knowledgeable about the JFK side of it because Lamar and I wrote 2 books about that, and one of them involves the King stuff, but Lamar did all the King's work on that one by that time. So I'm sorry, I can't, you're deeper into it than I am, Robbie, and I salute you for it.
That's cool.
Okay, thanks a lot for the call. Deborah in Denver. Hey, Deborah, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm out here in Colorado. I just want to comment on a story that CNBC had with Jamie Dimon, a billionaire CEO from J.P. Morgan Chase.
Right.
It came out. He came out saying that Bernie wants government to run and control businesses. Mm-hmm. But what he's really saying is let corporations run and control government. All Bernie wants is government to run areas where it doesn't make sense for profits to be the determining factor, like your health.
Yep.
So when Elizabeth Warren pulled a Tonya Harding and smashed Bernie's kneecaps in, it was devastating to us because we thought no matter who wins, that they would run together and win the presidency. Yeah. And I was just wondering, what do you think about Hillary Clinton? Do you think she's the mastermind behind this big, huge divide? To kill 2 birds with 1 stone and divide.
I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any grand conspiracy here. I share your disappointment in the, when Elizabeth Warren came out and said that Bernie had said that a woman couldn't win the presidency. She should have just kept that on the QT. But I also get it. In fact, there's an op-ed in today's Washington Post that is titled, "In order to win, Bernie is going to have to fight dirty." And I think that, Elizabeth Warren's advisors told her that. I frankly think it's backfired on her. And I think that, we're seeing Bernie rise in the polls right now, and she's not. And I think that that's why. I think that she tried to kick him and it hurt her. And I mourn that. I'm very, very saddened by the whole thing. Deborah, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Ross in Detroit. Hey, Ross, what's up?
Hey. How you doing?
I'm well. Says here you're a Republican.
Yeah. Well, obviously, given the current state of the Republican Party and its further and further right from reality, I'm an independent now. My problem is I really am skeptical of the Democrats' ability to get Trump out at the box office. The Electoral College is against them. The candidates, whoever the candidate is, needs to build a broad base that has an electoral victory.
I agree. Do you have a?
They get tied up in popular vote, and to me, wanting badly to have a candidate to vote for. All I see is a group of whatever number it is now, 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, fighting like the Three Stooges trying to get through a doorway, the left door.
Yeah.
Rather than all of the candidates.
But that's what you saw 4 years ago on the Republican side, Ross.
Aiming for the general election.
Yeah.
This is a binary vote for the American people. Right now, America needs vanilla. We need the most vanilla candidate to settle this country down and hopefully get us back on track.
Well, that's the argument that Biden and Klobuchar and Buttigieg are making, and you may be right. That may be the correct argument, and I'm going to leave that up to the voters. I would prefer to see a more progressive candidate.
Well, the problem is they're a punching bag for the right, and
but if they punch back,
can build the electoral.
Here's the thing, Ross, real quickly. If you look at public opinion polls, you find that over 70% of Americans want free college education, want basically free health care, and as like Canada has, like every country in Europe has. And those are the things that Sanders and Warren are campaigning on, and I think that those will help. Ross, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
today from Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for White Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, Amex, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so the South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The president of Physicians for National Healthcare Plan, a group that I was the keynote speaker at their conference in Seattle like 12 years ago or something like that. Adam Gaffney is the president now. This is a doctors group who are in favor of single-payer healthcare. Adam Gaffney is apparently giving a presentation right now at the Global Health Economics colloquium, however you say that word, in Berkeley. And Stephen Vernon just tweeted this to me. I just retweeted it. Health insurance overhead. In Canada, the insurance overhead for health insurance, since the government provides health insurance to everybody, is 1.8%. In the United States, private insurers, 12.2%. Traditional Medicare in the United States is 2% overhead, like the 1.8% of Canada, regular Medicare. But Medicare Advantage, the overhead is 13.6%. I keep telling you how insanely profitable Medicare Advantage is for these giant health insurance companies, and how eventually, if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, odds are it's going to catch up with you. But it was put into law in 2005 by George W. Bush in order to destroy Medicare, and it's already taken a third of the customers away from regular Medicare and put them into these private health insurance plans. Medicare Advantage is not Medicare, and it should not be allowed to be called Medicare. I realize that they amended the Medicare law in 2005 to create what they called Medicare Part C, which is purely private coverage, but it is not Medicare, and people need to know that. So, just got a letter from Donald Trump, or Fred Flintstone did. Fred, we didn't think it was possible, but the Democrats have reached a new level of absurdity. First, they claimed they had overwhelming evidence against President Trump. Now they're claiming they need more evidence. This is the call for witnesses and documents, right? This just proves that Nancy and her minions fabricated lies, those words in all caps, and false evidence, those words in all cap, when they, all caps, wrongfully impeached President Trump. They've been lying to the American people from the start, and we need to do something about it. As one of President Trump's most loyal supporters, I gave Trump $5 back in 2016 just to get on the mailing list. As one of President Trump's most loyal supporters, we know you never fell for their dirty tricks. You always knew he did nothing wrong, and that's why we're coming to you for help so that we can fight back and make a statement. He noticed that your sustaining membership has officially expired. Geez, after what, 4 years? He's beginning to wonder if you still stand with him heading into 2020. Since you've meant so much to him over the past few years, if you renew your sustaining membership now, your donation will be double matched. Note, if you saved your payment information, your donation will go through immediately. Just contribute $24 before 11:59 p.m. tonight to renew your 2020 sustaining membership, and your contribution will be double matched. And then it goes through the whole thing. Is that 11:59 p.m. Eastern time or Pacific time, which is where I am? I don't know. But, you know, keeping you up to date on all the craziness that's coming out of the White House, and boy, is there an abundance of it these days. Is it Pilar in Richland, Washington, or Pillar? It's Pilar, right?
It's Pilar. Hi,
Pilar.
Tom.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I want to share my support for you and Free Speech TV, but I also wanted to share a quick compliment, if I could, before my comment, and that is to a conversation you were having last week, and I just wanted to say that not only do you offer this beautiful platform for all of us listeners, but you also offer an ability to hear conversation in a nice, in a very positive way, through debate, through the way you listen, the way you pivot and engage. And it's just so rare. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the way you engage with your audience and can do that in the midst of a conversation that you're not expecting to possibly hear. So first, I wanted to say that. You're welcome. And I wanted to talk about Bernie. I had a couple of things, but just limit it to that. There is the rising poll numbers going on, but there was an interesting article done, not an article, but a show on the internet, and it was called, The Intercept, and it was called the Bernie Sanders Blackout. And it was saying how a blackout could actually be positive for Bernie, because if they ignore him, then they don't criticize him. So that was kind of an interesting twist on the media, choosing not to.
Although in the last few days,
cover him.
I have seen numerous MSNBC commentators and guests explicitly, directly go after Bernie. I mean, they're seeing the numbers going up, and the corporatists are getting alarmed, frankly. But we saw this also in 2016.
Totally.
There's a massive Bernie blackout.
Yes. And I just wanted to share one other thing, which I listen to a lot of different YouTube and just follow some pretty famous, people who have platforms and podcasts. And one of those is Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan has over 7 million viewers, and he endorsed Bernie Sanders. So I was thinking to all viewers who are like me, who are worried about how Facebook is aligned with Donald Trump, that if you have powerful people with huge platforms and have so many people who follow them, their voice will probably, overshadow a false ad on Facebook.
There you go. And your voice can too. I mean, we all have.
Oh, totally. Yes.
Yeah, we all have an obligation, I think, to be speaking up and speaking out in every venue available to us as often as we can. Frankly, regardless of which Democratic candidate you support, but in particular for the ones that, which would be, Sanders and Warren, the ones who, in the corporate media, when they are discussed or mentioned, they're typically trashed, and I think that's just so unfortunate. Pilar, thank you so much for the call.
Oh, all right.
No, go ahead. You can finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to mention, it's a different thought about Pence, and I don't know if you noticed that the Republicans are doing, a fraction of the Republican Party is doing a Pence for president, and they're doing, so I've always thought that nobody wants Trump there, Republican or Democrat, in Congress, and that he probably won't be there, but Pence might be. So,
well, that was my
already
point.
Starting that advertising.
Yeah, that was my point. That if Trump is removed from office, you're going to have Pence, and they're going to, the media has largely ignored Pence. They've ignored his past, his bizarre positions on abortion, his passing the law in Indiana where women basically had to register a miscarriage with the local police department, and all this other stuff. I mean, Mike Pence is the Handmaid's Tale candidate, among other things, anyhow, it's all going to shake out. Pilar, thank you so much for the call. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Tom in Jerusalem, Israel. Hey, Tom. Thanks for watching us on YouTube.
Hey, how are you doing? I'll try to keep this in a nutshell, and I hate to be a cynic, but the military-industrial complex wants to settle a war with Iran. And the only person that I can think of right now is a neoliberal. And when neoliberals and neoconservatives get on the same dais, watch out. On December 6th of last year, literally the day before Pearl Harbor Day, a woman that I was commissioned with, who now has no legs and is a senator from Illinois, was on the same stage as Karl Rove, okay? And I forget somebody from...
you talking about Tammy Duckworth?
Yes. This woman, I think, could have the possibility of being a dark horse from Illinois. She's articulate, she's smart, and she's a war hero. I mean, who else are the Democrats going to put forward to beat Donald Trump? But not only that, to bring something to the military-industrial complex. I mean, we had wars with Obama in Libya and in Syria. Look, Syria's right next to me. When we had horrible, horrible dust storms because of Syria. They have slave markets in Libya because of him. I mean, because of these 20 years of wars, I had to leave the United States. I refused to serve in Iraq. And there's a difference between me and Tammy. I got legs. She ain't.
Yeah. I think that she's kind of following the Max Cleland path. He was a Democrat also. He came back. He was missing 2 legs and an arm. And he became kind of the on the Democratic side of the aisle, the favorite candidate of the Pentagon and of the defense contractors. But he was also, socially he was pretty good. And I think that probably describes Tammy Duckworth. I don't think, though, that there's any possibility that she's going to get into the 2016 election, Tom. It's too late.
Even as a vice president she was the head of the Veterans Affairs.
Sure. Well, she would possibly make a good vice presidential candidate for one of the 3 so-called moderates. But I'm suspecting, since all 3 of the moderate candidates, Klobuchar, Buttigieg, and Biden are white, that they're going to be looking for a candidate of color, Hispanic or black person, to balance the ticket. In a way that has some diversity. Although,
I hear you.
I get what you're saying about Tammy Duckworth. She could be strong on that side.
She's been on Seth Meyers. She is like hammering this guy. She is hammering him.
Hammering whom?
She said he's Donald Trump. She's like walking point. You know, if I can say that military term.
Right.
She's walking point.
Yeah.
She said. The president she had an easier time managing her toddler, which I know everything about because my girls were younger.
Yeah.
Well,
to the extent that she's on our side, let's embrace that. And to the extent that, she goes off in directions that we think might be a little too militaristic, let's speak out about that. But I don't think that she's going to be a factor in this election. Although, you never know. And Tom, thanks for the heads up on that. That's fascinating stuff. And thanks for watching us on YouTube all the way over there in Israel. Thank you, Tom, for the call. We'll be right back. It is, it's coming up on 17 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say, no, not a chance. And welcome back. Ryan, watching Free Speech TV in Springfield, Missouri. Hey, Ryan, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, it's Brian, and thank you so much for what you do. Normally, I'm listening via online because I am a blueberry in the strawberry patch. I don't get the opportunity to find you locally, so I listen to either WCPT or WRRD or WTTN in the Wisconsin area. But today, happened to be off and caught you on Free Speech TV. And notice there is behind you what appears to be a box or I don't even know what it is, maybe a set of sticky notes with an Air America logo. And that kind of got me to waxing nostalgic about Air America radio.
Yeah, this is, they're called what are these called? Mic flags, yeah. And you put them on the microphone, Air America.
Oh, very good, very good. So, and and I've been waxing nostalgic, as I said, about the heady days of Air America and their top-down business model. And these days, if you're going to listen to progressive talk radio or watch progressive talk television, you do have some options, but you have to do your homework in order to find them and then make sure that you're available to watch them.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people at the end of the show every day to please tell their friends about progressive media.
Yeah. So what, in your opinion, Tom, what's the future of progressive media? How do we? I don't know that we're ever going to be in a point where, where the Hannitys and the Limbaughs and the Ingrams and whatnot and their stranglehold on talk radio, but where do we go from here? How do we get this message out and to where talk radio, progressive talk radio, and progressive television is the rule and not the exception?
All right. The thing that really that has really there's two things that have largely hurt progressive talk radio, aside from the collapse of Air America. And Air America's big sin, their biggest sin, was that they were underfunded. They lost $18 million in 7 years, and Fox lost $400 million in 5 years. It's like their pockets just weren't deep enough. And they didn't last long enough to start making a profit. But the other thing was in 1996, when Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act, prior to that, it was against the law for any one entity to own more than a relatively small number of radio stations. As I recall, it was like 30 or 40. And as soon as that Telecommunications Act was passed, Clear Channel went from being a small regional owner of radio stations to owning almost 1,000 radio stations. At one point, they were over 1,000. And they had an institutional bias toward conservative talk. Now, when Air America was on the air, we were leasing Clear Channel stations. And that's why when, later on in the life of Air America, when Mitt Romney took over Clear Channel, or Bain Capital took over Clear Channel, they started dropping Air America stations. And every time there was an election, they would drop Air America stations. And that also led to the death of Air America. But frankly, I think that, number one, we need to repeal or reverse the Telecommunications Act, which I don't think is going to happen tomorrow. The other thing that could happen is if Mike Bloomberg was to take $2 billion and buy Clear Channel with it, we'd have a chance. We'd have a good chance.
Yeah.
And just put progressive stations on, or buy Cumulus. I mean, these companies are no longer called that. It's iHeartMedia, and Cumulus has got a different name now too, because they keep going through bankruptcies and things. But we need a media mogul. We need our equivalent of the Dickey brothers or Romney or whatever. Ryan, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. 21 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you, speaking the truths of multinational corporations we'd really rather you didn't know all about. Alan in Seattle. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, I have a trivia question for you.
Okay.
What do these 6 people have in common? And the people are Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Alexandria Cortez.
Whoa. You've got me stumped.
All right. Do you want to...
Other than that they were all relatively progressive. I mean,
Do you want to give your listeners a chance, or do you want the answer now?
No, just give us the answer, Alan. It's
The answer is, I'll read off the names a different way, and such, by doing that, you'll know the answer. So the 6 people are FDR, JFK, LBJ, RFK, MLK, and AOC.
Oh, they all had 3-letter, they're all known by their initials, by their monogram.
Yes, all of them instantly recognized by their 3 initials. And I think they're the only 6 people, the only ones I can come up with, that are instantly recognized by their 3 initials.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It puts them all in good company with each other.
There you go.
So
there you go.
You have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. That's fascinating. Kim in Port Huron, Michigan. Hey, Kim, what's up?
Yes, hello. My quick statement is for Ross and anyone like-minded in the media. Malcolm Nance says he'd vote for a chicken sandwich before he'd vote for Trump. That's all they need to know.
Hallelujah.
Now, my question to you is, what are the pros and cons for adding to the Supreme Court? And I'll let you go to answer it.
Sure. In fact, there's a whole chapter about this in my hidden history book on the Supreme Court. I don't see any downside. Well, actually, it depends on who's president and who controls the Senate. If you have Democrats in control of the Senate and you have a Democratic president, then expanding the Supreme Court would allow us to break the 5-4 deadlock, which might even be a 6-4 if any of the Democrats were to have to leave the court before January of next year, and because Mitch McConnell
real quick, if that does happen, how long does it take to undo stuff?
What do you mean by undo stuff?
If we get the House, the Senate, and the White House, and put somebody else on the Supreme Court or whatever, how long does it take to fix the things they've done? Does it take?
It would take some time, because if you're gonna repair, for example, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, or the Supreme Court in '76 and '78, and then in 2010 in Citizens United said money is speech and corporations are persons and all that kind of stuff. To reverse those things, you have to have a case before the court. So, Elizabeth Warren has actually talked about this at some length, that she wants to pack the court. She wants to expand the court, put some good progressives on there, and then they will start running up some test cases before the court so that they can reverse some of these insane decisions that the Supreme Court has made. And I would also go back to the dozen or so decisions that have progressively, in small increments, gutted union rights in the United States as well. It would probably take a couple of years for that to happen, but
that means we'd have to hold control.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, typically, to get something to the Supreme Court, typically, first you have to get it to a local court, and then it's got to go to an appeals court, and, there's a bunch of steps, that before something gets to the Supreme Court. Although it is possible to drive things directly there if you can do them as, if you've got conflicts between two appeals courts, or although they have to have gotten that far, or conflicts between individual states, or between states and the federal government. Those are all places where the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction as opposed to, final appellate jurisdiction. But, I totally agree with Elizabeth Warren, and I assume Bernie is in agreement with this, although I don't recall him specifically saying it, that we need to do something about that. Kim, thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. Frank in Woodland, California. Hey, Frank, what's up?
Hey, Tom. My older brother graduated in the early 70s from Howard University. I used to go down on summer vacation or something just to visit. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, we used to call Washington, D.C., we called it Chocolate City because there were so many black people.
Well, it was a majority African-American city. It may still be. But that majority has diminished dramatically in the last 10, 15 years as a result of gentrification. But yeah.
Exactly. So that's my point. I'm thinking, well, from George's point earlier today, in terms of statehood, I think like that sort of imbalance might have a little something to do with it.
Well, that's why the Republicans won't allow statehood. It's because it's a majority-minority city, and has been for a long time. So yeah, spot on, Frank. Spot on. Thanks for the piece of history. I appreciate the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. We're coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. Talk media for the rest of us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And just to keep you up to date, the Democrats today are making the argument that Donald Trump obstructed justice, the massive cover-up he's been orchestrating for the last year. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthi published a short story entitled Chains, Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Corinthi's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative, yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday. Will in Eureka, California. Hey, Will, what's on your mind?
Hi, first-time caller.
Thank you.
Be brief. I have a reason that Trump's going to start a nuclear war that nobody has mentioned.
Okay.
He wants to be remembered. That's his main thing. And whether he gets reelected or runs again, before he leaves office, I think he's going to start a nuclear war, and mankind will remember his name for the rest of our history. What do you think? I'll hang up and listen.
I think, Will, that you may be onto something. And here's, and I realize how far out that sounds, but a dear friend of mine, Armin Lehman, Armin and I back in the 80s taught in the travel industry, principally. We taught seminars all around the country, or all around the world, actually, on marketing and advertising. Armin was absolutely brilliant in this area. And I learned later, after we finished this, I learned in the late 90s, actually, as a matter of fact, Armin and I kept in touch. And he came and visited us one day, this maybe 99, 2000, something like that. And he said, I've written a book, and I would like to give you a copy in case anything happens to me. He said, I think it's a really important book. And I said, well, tell me about it. And he said, well, when I was 15 years old, I was drafted into the German army. And when I was 16, I was the young man who brought the news to Adolf Hitler that the war was lost. And I stood outside his door as he went in with Eva Braun and killed himself. And he said I was there when Goebbels committed suicide with his family. And he wrote a book about this. It's called Hitler's Last Courier. You can find it on Amazon. Armin has now passed away. I mean, he was 20, 30 years older than me, obviously, if he was 16 years old in 1945. And one of the points that Armin made to me was that Hitler wanted to take Germany down with him. That Hitler was, if he was going to vanish, Germany had to vanish. And the Germans who had let him down had to suffer. This was Hitler's perspective, was that his army had let him down, his people had let him down, everybody had let him down, and so he was going to kill himself, but he was also going to let Germany basically commit suicide. I think that the point of maximum danger for the United States, and I'm not saying that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler, but I think they shared a lot of characteristics in terms of narcissism and psychopathology. I think that they're both sociopaths and they're both narcissists. The point of maximum danger with regard to Donald Trump is if he loses the election in November but stays as president from November 4th until January 20th. That's 3 months, roughly, during which he can do extraordinary damage to this country, and during which it wouldn't surprise me if he did something so bizarre or so extreme, like, throwing missiles into Iran or something, that it could provoke World War III. I think he would like to go out with a bang, and I absolutely wouldn't put it past him. And I realize how radical this sounds. But, I've been thinking about this since the late 90s or the early 2000s when Hartmann told me that story and I read his book. And I don't know if his book is still in print. I know that you can still buy used copies of it if it's not. But it's Armin, it's ARMINLEHMAN is his name, and it's worth checking out. And there's another book, too, Defying Hitler by Sebastian Hafner, and then who is that, Sean? Who is the guy in his 90s that we had on about 6 months ago? He has since passed away, who wrote a book about the parallels between Hitler and Trump, and he wrote that book like last year. I'm missing his name. I'm sorry, but there's
Hitler's his hero. So,
well, yeah. I mean, his wife Ivana said that.
Remember Hitler's name. So
yeah, Ivana said he had the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler next to his bed, on his nightstand. Right. So, it's like, look out, everybody. Will, thanks for the call. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Well, first of all, I'm walking around with my Nobody's Above the Law bag from Free Speech TV.
Oh, good on you.
Conversation starter.
Great.
And sitting in the doctor's offices, I'm reading the Supreme Court and the betrayal of America.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes. But I have been thinking about this vote. Mitch McConnell has, in my opinion, committed treason. Those 11 senators who went to Russia on July the 4th of 2018, we have still not heard anything about why they went or what they did.
Let's say 11 Republican senators, yes.
Correct.
They spent the 4th of July in Moscow.
2016, yes. Yep. And then you think about Trump standing up next to his good buddy Putin after that meeting over there and saying that he trusts Putin over our intelligence services.
Yes.
I have, for many months, I guess the past 2 years, considered Trump to be a Russian asset. And it made me think about all the times that Russia built those cities, and they had their own little villages where they taught people how to merge into a foreign country and become a citizen that you could not distinguish from the real citizens.
Right, and let's be clear, by the way, that Russia's not the only country that does that. We do too.
I know.
And so
I know.
Probably so does China and some other countries. But in any case, yes, to your point.
Yes, but I'm beginning to wonder if Trump has been so tightly bound with Russia, if he has actually been an asset and he is running the biggest masquerade there ever was, and that the Republicans don't have another candidate right now, and so they're trying to protect their candidates so they can protect the election so they can maintain power.
Right, because they know how weak Pence is.
Yes, and so they are putting their party over what is best for the country, which to me I consider treasonous.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering when the dust settles and we actually do know the truth, and these people are still alive, how many of them would be charged with treason?
I doubt any of them.
Yeah.
But my take on what Trump is doing and Trump's relationship with Russia is a little different than conventional wisdom. I don't think that, at some point in his life, Trump decided, I'm going to align myself with a foreign country, and I'm going to, I think what happened was Trump is a lousy businessman. He's an incompetent businessman. The vast majority of the companies that Donald Trump has started have gone bankrupt or shut down, or even been convicted of fraud, like Trump University.
Correct.
Right.
You're
so
correct.
After his 5th or 6th bankruptcy, there was literally not a single bank in the United States that would fund him. And I believe that right around that time, and David K. Johnston, by the way, lays a lot of this out in some of his books about Trump and just in general about this stuff. I believe that around that time,
on the tar baby.
I beg your pardon?
Trump got stuck by the tar baby. He can't let go.
Well, yeah, although that's sometimes thought of as a racist trope these days. But
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good, Norma. I know what you meant. But I think that what happened around that time was two things. Number one, Trump needed immediate cash. And being in the real estate business, he had assets that he could sell for cash dollars rather than checks or credit cards, condos and apartments and things like that. And at that time, this was the late 90s, this was, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of oligarchy in the Soviet Union, you had a bunch of billionaires emerging out of not just the Soviet Union, but also the Stan countries and Ukraine and, that whole region, because of the way that Milton Friedman and his buddies, or the Chicago School buddies, liberalized, as it were, Russia. So those oligarchs were looking for places to stash their money. So Trump became the go-to destination for money laundering. And we know of something like $60 million that has been laundered through some of his properties. And there's guesses that it's actually in the hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even more than that. So number one, that happened. And then number two, even that wasn't enough. And Trump needed to borrow at least $1 billion, and all indications are it was more like $2 billion. And he couldn't find a single bank anywhere in the world that would loan it to him. So this Russian-owned bank that was aligned with these Russian oligarchs said to Deutsche Bank, we will backstop Donald Trump's loans. And so Trump at that point, and this would be like by 2000, 2001, Trump is basically owned, not by the Russian government, not by Vladimir Putin, but by a bunch of mobbed up oligarchs who live in the world of the Eastern European mob. I mean, they kill people who get in their way. And Trump is owned by these people. And I think he's scared to death of these people because they still own him. And I think that that's what's going to be coming out in the end of the day. That not that Donald Trump decided, hey, I'll be a traitor, but that they got him by the short hairs and they have been holding him there since 2001 or thereabouts. Late 90s, early 2000s, and that's why he's desperately trying to keep his taxes hidden, and that's why he's suing to prevent Deutsche Bank from revealing who backstopped his loans.
I think you're correct, and I also think that he, like you said, he is stuck with these oligarchs, and he can't get himself loose.
Right, and I don't see this as some grand Russian conspiracy or Vladimir Putin as the giant puppet master in terms of long periods of time. Although once he became a serious candidate for president, and then even more importantly, once he became president, boy, you've got a president who owes fealty. I mean, it would be as if if Boris Yeltsin owed his political career to Santo Trafficante, the head of the U.S. mafia, and suddenly he'd be dancing to the tune of America, even if he didn't know who was president. So, frankly, I think that that's how it's all shaking out. But time will tell. We need these investigations to find out. Norma, thank you for the call.
We need a decent vote.
Yeah, there you go. Amen. There's a lot we need. Norma, thank you very much. It's great talking with you as always. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls here on Anything Goes Friday in the Thom Hartmann Program in just a moment. Stick around, helping you win the water cooler wars. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Tell your friends about it.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
The other former German that we have talked with about Hitler and the parallels to Trump was by the name of Henry Oster, O-S-T-E-R, and you can find his book online. And welcome back. Russ in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Russ, what's up?
Tom, I have to take exception to what you said earlier about, you basically said that Elizabeth brought this whole thing up between, her and Bernie, the conversation in December of 2018 where Bernie said that a woman could not win the presidency. She did not drag this into the public square. It was a leak to CNN, confirmed by the New York Times and BuzzFeed News. She was then put under considerable pressure by the media to address the situation, which she eventually did. What was she to do? Be a good little girl, as you kind of intimated, and just keep her mouth shut?
Yes, I think so.
No.
I think so. I think this was an intentional hit on both of them, and I think she should have simply said, I'm not going to comment on that. She should have known that this would blow up in her face.
Well, I think that's another thing, that where I have to take exception. I mean, you're basically saying that her situation in the polls is a result of this kerfluffle or whatever you want to call it between her and Bernie, and you have no way of knowing that.
No, I don't, but I see the timing of this seems coincidental. I mean, I love Elizabeth Warren. I would love for her to be president. 4 years ago, Bernie held back on jumping into the race against Clinton for at least 4 or 5 months that I know of because he wanted Elizabeth Warren to run. I think she would be a spectacular president. I feel the same way about Bernie Sanders, of course. And I see that leak to CNN as an intentional attempt to take down the progressives in the race. But she didn't have to take the bait.
Well, I think that's no pun intended, debatable.
Yeah, I get it.
She was put under a lot of pressure by the media people in this country to address that issue.
But it doesn't mean she had to.
I disagree. We're just going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, I get it. Russ, thank you for the call. Thanks for a civil conversation about things that people tend to get very steamed about. I appreciate it. Richard in Bellevue, Washington. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Another happy Friday in Trumpistan.
Yeah, there you go. What's up?
And good news on that front. The vacant chair in the Ukraine, the one that was just given up by the former acting head, they've got a nominee for it. Boris Epstein.
Seriously?
Oh, I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding.
Thank you. Okay.
No, Tom, I wanted to go ahead and say I'm so impressed with Adam Schiff, my new great American patriot.
Yes, he's doing a spectacular job.
And I wanted to paraphrase one of the statements he was making to the Senate jury yesterday on what he said, wouldn't you like to see the document? Wouldn't you like to go ahead and hear from I'd like to go ahead and pose to your audience, would you like to go ahead and see 4 more years of this presidency? Wouldn't you? It's a horror question.
Yes. Well, that's what we're confronting. I mean, that's very much what we're confronting. And not only that, if Donald Trump gets reelected, he will be super empowered. And he has said on numerous occasions, he thinks 4 more years isn't enough. I mean, I think the only thing that's going to stop him is cheeseburgers. I'm serious. I could see 4 years from now, if he's still alive and going, and maybe if he gets his diet under control a little bit and makes it through, that he could declare a state of emergency. The Patriot Act allows the presidential elections to be suspended in time of emergency. I mean, this is like scary stuff, Richard, and your point is well taken. Thank you very much for the call. It's good to hear from you. We'll be right back. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. James in Spokane, Washington. Hey, James, what's up?
Hey, how are you today, sir?
Good. What's on your mind?
I know what you say about the circular firing squad, and I subscribe to that theory, but I really worry that Pete Buttigieg is a Manchurian candidate. Because I'll remind you, I told you before, I don't know if you heard it, but this is on Lee Camp's show by Max Blumenthal, and I think they're both relatively unimpeachable, is my opinion.
Yeah, I like Lee, and I know Lee and Max very well, and I respect both of them tremendously, and they do great broadcasting and great programs, but I don't think that Pete Buttigieg is a Manchurian candidate. I think he's just a Democrat who is not just willing, but enthusiastic about taking corporate money.
Can I repeat his quote?
Sure.
He said that he would be the first gay president to lock Chelsea Manning in a gulag, and I kind of question his choice.
Well, yeah. I mean, he might continue those policies, but let's keep in mind, I believe it was Chelsea Manning put in jail by Bush or Obama.
I don't recall.
Yeah, well, Chelsea. Yeah, I thought it was Obama, and I thought that. That she continued there, but
she's still in jail right now.
Yeah, and she's back in jail now. I get what you're saying, but I'm not willing to say he's a Manchurian candidate. We can have disagreements in our party. Alan in Palatine, Illinois. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
I'm under the impression that the Democratic primaries the delegates are awarded proportionally in each state. Maybe it's different from one state to another rather than winner take all. And what I'm worried about is with 4 or 5 viable candidates, we get to the convention, and no one has a majority of candidates. And all I know, or delegates, what I know at this point is that on the second ballot, all of the
superdelegates come in. Yeah.
Kick in. And so what I'm worried about is our two progressive candidates splitting the vote of the progressives. And
I share your concern, Alan. I don't know what to do about it, but I share your concern.
Well, I'm wondering whether we should start lobbying our candidates to make a deal, and for one of them to drop out gracefully and endorse the other, so that when they get there, they have.
It's just not going to happen. I know Bernie, and I've met Elizabeth Warren, and they both are very strong in their convictions and their beliefs about what they want to do, what they can do, and they both believe that they're the right person. That history has put them here at this moment. I don't know that I can't say that they literally would say it that way, but they have certainly, both of them have a sense of history, and I think what's going to happen is that as we get closer, and particularly after Iowa, you're going to start seeing the progressive vote consolidate to one or the other of those two candidates, and you're also going to see the moderate vote, in quotes, consolidate to one of the other three candidates. And the wild card is Bloomberg, although he's already spent a quarter of $1 billion, and he's still polling at around 4%. So he may just be the guy who kneecaps Trump. I don't know, but we're just going to have to we just keep on going, and let's not attack our own candidates, and let's let them work it out. Alan, your point is well taken. Thanks a lot for the call. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind?
Hey, I hope you don't mind. Do you mind if I switch to Hamilton?
Please.
Okay. I just my girlfriend and I about 2 weeks ago got back from Nevis and St. Kitts, the birthplace of Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And first of all, the place is beautiful. These are islands that Americans don't go to, which is right off our shore, which are island nations that are very dynamic in how they run their governments.
Yeah, they're anyway. French, aren't they? Or are they British?
No.
They're British.
They were French. They're English. They're still part of the English Commonwealth.
Okay.
So their currency gets bolstered. They only have they use the Eastern Caribbean dollar, which is only 3 to 1 American dollar.
Right.
Whereas Jamaica, it's 145 Jamaican dollars to the dollar.
Right.
So they do pretty well, and it's a small country. Anyway, I found out, and the people who lived there told me first that he was Jewish, because Nevis had a large Jewish population, and he was taught in a Jewish school. He learned how to speak Hebrew, and it turns out that his mother, who was from the island of St. Croix, which was Danish at the time, married a Dutch Jewish merchant, and she converted to Judaism. And then he divorced, and then she went to Nevis, and she took up with this guy Hamilton, and then had Alexander. So he is Jewish, and the reason why he never mentioned it was because he would never get anywhere in the government, especially being Secretary of the Treasury.
Yeah, and anti-Semitism was rampant. Well, it has been throughout history.
He was a big advocate when no one was about anti-Semitism, and he defended a lot of Jewish people in New York and in court and everything.
Yeah.
But my family has a connection too, because my father was one of the last surviving members of Hamilton's Society for the Establishment of Useful Manufacturers.
Oh my! From 1791.
Right.
Yeah.
Patterson, you can still go there. There's a huge waterfall. They still have. They still get like 50,000 homes that are electrified by that waterfall.
Extraordinary.
But it's a good place to go, and it's a center for labor.
What a great story.
Anyway,
Bill, I got to run. I'm sorry, it's the end of the show. But thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your story. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back next week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, a great Friday evening, and whatever it may mean to you. It means a lot to me. I love the weekends. I love Friday nights. It's my time to power down and, light a candle and have a glass of wine. So anyhow, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It actually does require you. So please get out there, get active, tag "You're It," and tell your friends where to find progressive media. Get them hooked. We'll see you Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series. On Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle. Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis. Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland. And Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.